Hello, hello, and welcome to today's live stream. My name is Tyler Hakes. I run the content marketing agency Optimist, as well as the content marketing community, Top of the Funnel. I'm super excited to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about Google SGE, Search Generative Experience, and AI in the search results, essentially. And we are joined by Lily Ray. Lily is the Senior Director of SEO, as well as the Head of Organic Research at AMSIV Digital. But you've probably seen her on your Twitter feed sharing all kinds of updates and experiments and feedback on the Google SGE as it's been rolled out. She's been just sharing a ton of information about what's going on and how she's seeing it sort of change in the search landscape. So I'm super excited to dive in with Lily today and answer questions. First of all, thanks all who have already commented in the chat. Please continue to say hello in the chat. Let us know who's here, where you're from. Would love to just see who's joining us. Second of all, if you don't mind, I would love if you could hit the like button on this video, help other folks find it. Also would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are creeping ever closer to the coveted 1,000 followers here on YouTube. We host all kinds of amazing workshops, live Q&As, just really great content around content marketing and SEO. So if that's your jam, subscribe there on YouTube and join us for future sessions. I also want to just really quickly mention our community. So all of the programming that we share here on YouTube is really sort of part of our free community for content marketers. We have over 2,000 folks who are a member. It's called Top of the Funnel, and it's focused on all things content marketing, SEO. We have a combination of in-house marketers, agency folks, freelancers, just sharing ideas, asking questions, getting feedback, sharing work opportunities. There's all kinds of cool stuff happening inside this free Slack channel. So if that's you, if you're a content marketer, inbound marketer, SEO person, and you want to connect with folks all over the world who are learning together, sharing ideas and insights, join us there, yesoptimist.com/tofu. And again, that's free. So yeah, would love to have you as part of our community there. Cool. Well, thanks for your patience, y'all. I know we started a couple minutes late, but I'm really excited again to welcome today's guest, Lily Ray. We're going to be talking about Google SGE and what it means for us as marketers and as SEO folks. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Lily now.
Hey there. How you doing?
Hey, Lily. I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Well, really quick, before we get into the questions about sort of Google SGE and sort of what it is and all that stuff, this seems like something that you really gravitated towards right away. Was there sort of a specific thing that kind of triggered you, or what sort of sparked your interest in SGE specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, as soon as Google started talking about, potentially incorporating AI generated content into the top of the search results, of course, that has a huge impact, not only on SEO professionals and our clients, but, the nature of the flow of information around the internet, which is fundamentally like why I enjoy SEO so much. So that's obviously a big deal, but I had several talks planned in the past couple of weeks around Europe, and I was going to be speaking about AI and SEO, and this SGE thing happened, and it was announced in May. And then I was lucky to be able to get access to Google Labs and beta test SGE with many other people here in the US. So it's become a bit of a passion, to be honest. You can't really avoid it. Once you have Labs turned on, it's there in your face. So hard to miss. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to plan content this year because everything has been changing every few weeks. It's like, oh, now it's we were going to talk about this topic, but now that thing's totally changed. We got to talk about it in a totally different way.
Yep, that's 2023 so far for sure.
Cool. Well, let's just quickly level set. So the focus today, obviously AI is sort of everywhere at the moment, but we're talking specifically about SGE, Search Generative Experience. Can you just explain for anybody who might not be 100% clear what that is specifically?
Yeah, so this is Google's name for a new product that they're kind of testing right now. And there's limited kind of beta access, mostly within the US here. You can sign up with Google Labs and hopefully get approved for that to see how it works. So it's not live yet, but it stands for Search Generative Experience. And They announced it officially at Google I/O, although a lot of us kind of knew leading up to it that there was going to be some type of announcement along these lines. And there were some like prototypes and mock-ups before the official announcement at Google I/O, which didn't show links to publishers in the original mock-up. So that's obviously highly problematic for publishers and SEOs and many other people. And luckily, the version that they do show now does have some links. You can see here on the right side, there's a carousel of links, and you can usually scroll within that carousel. You can see up to like, I've seen like 14 links appear in different iterations of what this result will look like. But, you know, the jury is out as far as will people click on those links. And unlike Bing Chat, which is at the moment the most similar competitive product, Bing Chat includes lots and lots of links and annotations throughout the text content. So that's one thing that is very different about SGE.
Yeah, super helpful. And yeah, so I am sharing here. So this is just one of the many examples. And again, if you're not already following Lily on Twitter, definitely pop over to her Twitter. I'll share the handle here in just a second. But she shares all kinds of examples of very specific, you know, use cases and queries and sort of what the SGE experience looks like. So, you know, in this example, we can see there's sort of a text, you know, similar to like a featured snippet kind of, right? It's like kind of, but I'm assuming it's AI generated. So it's not just pulled verbatim from a website. And then we have sort of this carousel of links, as you said, sort of on the right side here, showing us, I guess, some of the sources or potentially, you know, more information about it.
Yeah. It's, technically, this is an interactive view, but if you click on that button in the upper right, that's like the source button. I don't know the actual word for it, but essentially what it does is it breaks down the answer into components, and then it'll kind of associate each one of those links that you're seeing on the right side to where they got it from. And to your point, yes, it's AI generated, but we've seen, and I've shared several examples in my presentations about situations where Google pulls the text verbatim up to like maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs of text from the page. So in a sense, it is a featured snippet sometimes, but without the same attribution that we're used to with regular featured snippets.
Right. Wow. Okay. So we have a ton to unpack here, and obviously there's already questions flooding in, and I forgot to mention at the top, but this is a live Q&A, so we will be taking questions from folks in the chat. So please keep posting those. I'll try to grab those questions from the chat as we sort of touch on those topics. But I also have some questions that we're gonna go through. So before we get too much further, you mentioned, I think it was May or sometime around there, where Google sort of officially announced the release of SGE, or the beta of SGE. Have we seen much change since that original announcement or since the initial rollout?
I would say yes. Those of us that have access to it will know by now that it's very different. Every time you search, it kind of behaves differently, and from day to day, it'll do different things. So I think one of the problems that a lot of us in the beginning, like, it was kind of problematic because a lot of us assumed that, we're seeing it do this thing, so therefore it's going to do this thing, and people in this category should be really concerned. And that's just not, it's just way too early, clearly, to make those types of conclusions.
Right.
For example, maybe like the first week or 2 that I was experimenting with it, if you typed brand names, it would have a huge like takeover of the whole first page, talking about the brand and their history, without a link to the brand, without Google ads at the top. And I was like, this cannot last, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't do that anymore. So now we see a lot of ads at the top. So every day it's a little bit different. Obviously, it's being tested. That's the whole point. So I just think it's important for SEOs that have access to it and are trying to get an understanding of how it works, just to know that it's not done yet, clearly, and we can't draw conclusions about what it's going to look like in its final form.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. Thanks for bringing that up, Lily, because yeah, obviously people are already, like, I don't know, selling courses probably on how to prepare for this stuff. But, you know, this is in beta. There's a lot of things that are clearly not going to make it to the final version of this for a myriad reasons. So everything that we discussed today, of course, is sort of under that same umbrella, where it is an evolving product. Things are likely to change. And so, you know, there's no definitive statement about here's what we should be doing right now or how this is going to work in the future. With that said, based on sort of your experimentation and your experience with it so far, Lily, you know, what are your kind of high level thoughts? How are you feeling about SGE, you know, if it were to kind of roll out to the public?
It's not ready yet across the board. It's just not ready yet. number one, the information it provides is often completely wrong. Straight up, it's just completely wrong. Google's piecing information together from different places and often getting things very wrong. I shared an example last night where it said that this certain like 3-ounce pack of chocolate at Walmart is the MSRP price is what, $198 or something. And I went and looked at the Walmart website and it was $2. So it's like just these little details are just wrong. So like, of course, this is, that's why they're testing it. But my concern is like, how can you get all these things that are currently wrong to be right in a reasonable time frame? I don't know if it's possible. I'm not an AI engineer, but there's a lot of incorrect information, number one. Number two, I don't feel like it's adding a lot of value to Google search results, to be honest. I think that SERP features that we've had for a long time, so things like top stories, Google Maps, featured snippets, Google Shopping, like they've engineered these things for years to be extremely helpful depending on the user's query. And it works. Like largely speaking, it works. So SGE often will appear at the top of the search result and push down like Google Maps, featured snippets, Google Shopping, something that's already been there and been tested for years to be like helpful for users. But like it'll either say something that's completely redundant or something that's not helpful. So yesterday I asked, what are some techno music events tonight in New York City? And then I said, what are some techno parties this evening in New York City? Basically the intent is I want it to be today. And SGE says, these are some of the best clubs in New York. Nothing about events happening tonight. And then the search results are all about things happening tonight. So it's like, we're just pushing down things that have been like
that are actually valuable
for years. Yeah. So it's not ready. That's just my opinion, but I really don't think it is.
Yeah. No, again, just circling back to what you were saying before. I mean, obviously there's so many things that they're still working on and changing, but yeah, it feels like there's just a lot of gaps to fill in there. I do want to talk a little bit, again, blanket disclaimer, we expect things will probably change based on the experience that you've shared so far and what we've seen. But, as it exists right now, we talked a little bit about like citations and links. So it sounds like that piece of it has definitely evolved. Can you talk a little bit more? You mentioned like the carousel sources, and then there's also sort of the interactive piece here at the top where it breaks down the actual response with sources. But there are no links in the written content here at the top. Is that true?
For the most part, yeah. It actually hasn't evolved that much with regard to links, unfortunately. There's some new features that Google is testing as far as adding links to other Google products and other Google pages. So for example, you might see links to Google Shopping. You might see links to Google Maps locations, like Google business profiles. So much in the same way that you see a Google Map result and you can kind of expand to see that Google business profile with all the information about that business, you can do that with SGE as well. I don't know that they've added that much more in terms of like external linking or more of these types of like thumbnails on the upper right, unfortunately. I really personally believe that it would be in their best interest to add a lot more links within the text, the way that Bing does. So, Bing has not only like underlined anchor text within the text answer itself, but they'll also have annotations and then links at the bottom to where they got individual information from. Not only because I'm an SEO, obviously it's beneficial for us, but like, it's just a bad user experience. Like if you're going to recommend a specific product and not tell me where to buy that product or not make it easy for me to buy that product, I don't think that's a great user experience.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, makes total sense. And I think you even mentioned this, things like branded results, like obviously somebody's looking for a specific brand, like they're probably going to go to their website. They don't want to just see an AI generated snippet that talks about the brand. Like just doesn't make sense. So Saj, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, had a question that I want to touch on really quick. So they said they noticed that the content, I assume they're referring to sort of the generated content at the top here, is generally pulled from the top 3 links, which I assume they are referring to the top 3 organic results. Maybe let's just unpack that question. In your experimentation so far, Lily, do you have a sense for, where is this content coming from? Is it related to your ranking in the SERPs or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an important question. So I think what Saj means is that the 3 links that are shown here in this carousel are the links that are providing the AI answer. That's true. So if you go to the upper right button again and you click that little source link, you'll see the breakdown of like, it kind of tries to tie each paragraph or each sentence to the place where it got it from. And actually it will show more than those three. So like I had an example in my presentations from the past couple of weeks where you say how to tie a bow tie, and then you go to that source link and it'll show you like the first, the first step in tying a bow tie, and then it'll show you 6 different like sites where it got that step from. So it's like corroborating information, looking at a bunch of different sources, which is awesome, especially if you can see directly where it's getting that information from. And then if you click on those links, it'll often jump you to the block of text and highlight the block of text, using that like scroll to text that Google has to tell you exactly where they got it from. So I think actually when you click on the source button in the upper right on SGE, personally, I think that's a much better experience. And I hope that Google actually makes that the default experience, but that's just me.
Okay.
The next part about, are those 3 links that you're seeing there the same, like generally the same as the 3 top ranking organic links on Google? The answer to that is no. In fact, I've seen a lot of sites appearing in SGE in very prominent positions that do not rank well on Google. And this is very problematic to me because there's all kinds of magic, as we all have known for years, that create rankings organically in Google, and a lot of important factors like authoritativeness and links and these things that are like, we've been working on this for years, and to somehow ignore a lot of like the importance of those different ranking factors and draw from another page kind of like invalidates like the whole idea of trying to have accurate and trustworthy information. So I think it's not a great approach, whatever they're currently doing, to be honest.
That's that is super interesting. And yeah, it is sort of strange. It's if the Google results over, as you said, over 10, 20, however many years we've been doing this now, have been meant to provide the best information, then why would that information not be the source for the result, right? Yeah, that's sort of a strange reality. Have you noticed any patterns around the types of links that do appear here in this carousel? I know I saw some early examples, and I may have actually even cited something that you shared, where it seemed to be sort of more niche specific websites rather than like broad sites and publishers.
That's a good observation. I don't know whether or not I've noticed the same thing, but thinking about it more, I think you're right that like, I think you're more likely to see a bit of like a niche blogger who has a very specific answer to a question than a major publisher who has a very comprehensive article on the same topic, assuming that the publisher doesn't have like the answer structured in the same way that Google's looking for. But I am seeing a lot, like especially in the SEO space, for a lot of the things that I look up with SEO, I'm seeing answers come from websites I've never heard of. And you know how that goes in the SEO space. It's
not for better or worse, yeah.
Not always great information. So that's a bit alarming in certain categories.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah, that's super helpful. Okay, so we've got sort of the carousel here. The results are generally, or the links in the carousel are generally not correlated with the traditional top 3 organic results. And as a general observation, we might be trending more towards more niche, small, focused websites versus larger publishers and more general websites.
Yeah, I think also one thing that's important to note. So in the example you're showing here, the best clubs in New York, I asked best events, techno events to do tonight. And what it's doing is it's showing 3 articles that have some type of opinion about what the best clubs are, or in one case, it's just like the Instagram account of one of the clubs. But they do like to look for like, what are people's beliefs on this? And am I seeing the same belief or the same opinion or fact kind of repeated across different places? And that will lead to an SGE result. So like one of the examples I gave was like the best places to have lunch in Madrid or whatever. And it said, this is the restaurant that people really love in Madrid. And then if you look at the sourcing from SGE, it was like 6 different restaurant review publications. So it's different than Google Maps, where it's like user generated reviews, proximity, all these other ranking factors. And it's just looking at like, what are these 6 restaurant review sites saying about lunch in Madrid?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So that's another interesting snippet that, or tidbit there that might come up in the future as sort of a potential, like, I guess, ranking factor in this case, sort of opinions, right? Or something like that, which is sort of different from the approach that I think most of us have taken to SEO for many years, which is that like you want to be sort of the definitive resource on a thing. You don't want to necessarily have a specific strong opinion one way or the other in a lot of cases. So that's a sort of interesting potential shift there. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, your expectations here. So again, with the caveat once again that this we don't expect this is the final form of this, but if Google were to roll something like this out to the public anytime in the near future, what would you expect to happen to search traffic?
Yeah, I think clearly it would have a pretty big impact on search traffic. I think that the same way we've seen featured snippets answer a lot of questions, I think that SGE can and does answer a lot of questions pretty comprehensively. The difference, it's a lot like what people are saying and noticing about ChatGPT, like myself included. There's kind of like this experience that you go through. Somebody even made a chart about what it's like to use ChatGPT extensively for several months, because in the beginning you're so wowed by it, and then you start to learn how it works. And then you're like, wait, I'm kind of skeptical about it. And then by the end, you're like, it does a lot of really cool things, but it's not always like correct, Right. So my concern with SGE is like, it will steal traffic if it launches in its current form or anything like it. But eventually users are going to realize it's not a good experience in many cases, and it's not giving them what they need, and it's redundant with other search results. And so when you launch a product like this to billions of your users or billions of searches every day, it's going to happen pretty fast that people are like, I don't like it, or there's something broken about it, there's something wrong with it. Bing has a lot fewer users than Google, so it'll just be amplified. Like whatever concerns people have about AI generated content, I think that it's really risky for Google to launch this in its current form for a number of reasons.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we would expect some sort of a decline, but as you've mentioned, perhaps because again, with its current form, it is in some cases, so not helpful, let's say, that people may just ignore it and may just, continue down to the organic results.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, Google obviously adapts its results and its features and everything based on user feedback, not only with search quality raters, but with actual people using Google. So if it takes 3 months for the general public to be like, this sucks, I imagine that they're going to change it in some major way, or maybe remove it or something, but we'll see,
Yeah. And so now let's talk a little bit about, again, based on what we know and kind of where things are at now and the experience, and maybe even thinking about the potential that we get sort of that, breakdown citation version as like the default in like a future version. Is there anything that you are recommending folks should be doing now to kind of prepare for this, or to minimize the traffic loss or maximize the traffic opportunity from the SGE?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistent with the same like SEO advice and strategy that my team at Amsec Digital and I have been recommending and working with clients on for a number of years. That it's really focused on what we call EEAT. So experience, expertise, authority, and trust. This just makes EEAT even more important. So like the presentations that I recently did about SGE, I did kind of a little experiment to see if I could affect what it shows in the answers by like changing website content or anything like that. And turns out that you can. It's not super reliable, but like I took a number of questions that people might ask about me that weren't really properly answered online or answered at all anywhere online. And I kind of created like highly controlled answers to those questions on my personal website. I later added some structured data that kind of like supported what those answers said. And it was able to influence what it shows in SGE. So that was pretty cool. Like if you ask it certain questions about me, sometimes, not all the time, it will show the answers that are pulled from that page. It's harder now to get it to work. And I think one reason for that is because for people like me and many people who have like names that are shared by a number of different people, Google has to be very confident that it's providing information about the right Lily Ray. So there's another Lily Ray in some book, some novel, where her father is a very problematic character in the novel. So one of the questions I added was like, what does Lily Ray's father do for work? It answered correctly, and then it started talking about the father from that book. Oh, Lily Ray's father is also this terrible person, and this, and I was like, well, no, this is not good, So I think they need to meet like a certain confidence threshold to show it consistently, which is what they're figuring out right now.
I'm super curious. What was sort of the timeline of that from when you made those changes to when you started to see that in the actual AI results?
Yeah, I was trying with both Bing and Google because Bing obviously has the AI chat that they've launched recently. So Bing's was much faster. And that's kind of the point of their chatbot is that it works really quickly because it works with Bing's live results, which use Index Now, which is very fast indexing on Bing. So Bing is like a day or less.
Wow.
Google was maybe more like 5 days on average to see them start to pick up the changes. Yeah.
That's fascinating, especially, for when you think about like a large language model that would pick up stuff that quickly. That's pretty impressive, honestly.
Better than ChatGPT, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You were just not a couple of years out of date. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I want to just sort of circle back and dive in there because you mentioned a couple things. I won't call them ranking factors per se, but like you talked about a couple of things that you've been experimenting with and sort of trying to use to influence the results here, and one of them was structured data. So can we just talk a little bit about that? Was there anything different or specific that you implemented when you were experimenting with that?
Yeah, I have to give credit to a company called WordLift. We did a presentation together in Italy. It was that they actually organized it. They're very focused on structured data. It's a WordPress plugin you can use to generate structured data for your site, among other things. And they did a similar presentation where they showed that they were able to influence some of the answers that they're getting from AI tools by adding structured data. So that inspired me to go do the same thing on my site. In fact, I actually used ChatGPT to generate the structured data really easily, which was pretty cool.
Love it.
It's all happening so fast right now. But yeah, like if you have like any type of statements on your page about, this is the organization's about page, this is the person's about page, or just anything, like this is how structured data is supposed to work. It's supposed to say, this company is owned by this parent company, they were founded on this date, this is the CEO. Like all of that can be kind of like confirmed with structured data. So if that's available, why not have it both be on the page as well as in the structured data?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And obviously we know that has already impacted the past search features. Feature snippets and all those things have been influenced by structured data and make it a lot easier for Google and other search engines or AI in the future to, like you said, understand these sort of complex relationships and different things that are happening. So it makes a lot of sense. And then the second thing that you mentioned was eat, or really that was the first thing. And so, obviously this is a sort of a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down, but I would love to just talk, at a high level. Can you just, for anybody who's not super knowledgeable about the current state of eat and kind of how people are thinking about that, can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so it was formerly EAT, which I talk and write about for years. It used to be expertise, authority, and trust. And in December of last year, they added the new E for experience. So now it's a mouthful and it's hard to say out loud, but it's EEAT or double EAT. And it's used in Google Search Quality Rater guidelines primarily, but now Google uses it across many, many more like documents and resources. But essentially, starting in about 2014, Google wanted to really use this acronym to train human search quality evaluators about like rating and scoring good and bad content on the internet as it relates to those factors. And we believe that they started to use it more and more heavily in the algorithms, particularly with core updates. Like it appears that they've been ramping up the importance of EEAT, especially beginning in about 2017 or 2018. And essentially what it means is that if you're not a trusted resource or an expert or authoritative resource on the topic, depending on the topic, it can be much harder for you to rank on Google. And it's more important and more consequential the more what we call your money or your life the content is. So things that can potentially cause harm to people or to society or individuals, that's really how they define it. The extent to which content can cause harm to people. That's when EEAT matters most. So health advice, medical advice, legal advice, financial, political, news, children's safety, things like this require extreme levels of EEAT on your site.
Yeah. And then, again, we don't have to go super duper deep here, but just high level bullet points. What are some of the factors that we know or think influence EAT at this stage?
Yeah, the best way to understand that is to read Google Search Quality Guidelines, which is 160 pages. So you can use ChatGPT to ask for the main points.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's a complicated question. People are often trying to synthesize it down into like a little checklist, which isn't really how it works. But if you think about what Google says in the quality reader guidelines as far as evaluating the reputation of a brand, of content creators, understanding where they've written before, if they're writing about cooking topics, do we have evidence that this author actually went to cooking school or has any type of award for cooking? It's like there's so many different places that you have to look to like to find evidence that the person is who they say they are and that we can trust them. But this is what we work with clients on. If you're a lawyer, what are all the cases that you've won? What are the awards that you've won? Which universities did you attend? When did you pass the bar? Like all of this needs to be very, very clear on your site. We don't know how much of it Google uses algorithmically, but users certainly look at it. So it's a vast area of SEO because there's no one right way to approach it, but there's thousands of different levers that you can pull to better convey EEAT.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so just to bring this full circle, we talked a little bit before about the carousel links and sort of the citations here at the top of the SGE box generally being more like niche and like opinionated. Do we think that correlates with EAT, like, sort of looking for more high authority specific sources?
I actually posted about that today.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that we're seeing like EEAT play out in the answers that Google's selecting for SGE as much as we have been seeing for the organic search results. So I don't know if they're using completely different ranking systems or how much EEAT matters, but like we talked about before, it kind of feels like exact matched wording on the page or very closely matched wording is a bigger influencer of being able to rank there than what we normally see with organic search.
Interesting. Right. Yeah. So sort of like how, people try to structure their content with, what is SGE or whatever to try to capture feature snippets and things like that, really trying to match the queries that people might be using. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's super interesting. So first of all, I'm going to just pause really quick and mention again, if you're not already following Lily on Twitter, definitely do that if you want to stay up to date. As I said, she's like literally posting up to the minute examples of things that she's finding and, ideas and things that she's uncovering. So your best source for sure is going to be to follow her on Twitter. I want to jump to a couple of our questions. We have some super specific questions I just want to hit on really quick. Let me scroll back up here. So this person had a specific question. Looks like we don't have a name, but just in general, how long does it take for the results to actually display when you have SGE at the top of the result?
Yeah, it's anywhere from, let's say, like 2 to 5 seconds on average, which is pretty long for Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for folks who are not actually familiar with it or maybe haven't seen the demo, it's like it actually like sort of writes or constructs the content kind of in real time, right?
Yeah, exactly. It takes it just shows a little spinny wheel when SGE is loading, and then it loads that whole green thing that you're seeing.
Okay. And then follow-up question to that is, basically, what's the user experience like if, say, you scroll past it while it's loading? Does it stop? Does it continue to load? How does it function?
Yeah, someone was saying recently on LinkedIn that it stopped. I don't think that it stops. I haven't seen it stop before. Once it starts to load, it finishes loading. It just sometimes takes a while, which is kind of ironic given what Google recommends to webmasters about not doing that.
Right.
But there's also there's a button at the top of many search queries where it won't load by default, but it will say, would you like to see an AI generated response for this answer? So sometimes you can choose to turn it on or off. And honestly, I hope that they stick with that. I think that would be a much better user experience.
Right. And that's another good point that we haven't stated explicitly, but SGE does not appear for every query. And there's also sort of two modes. One is like default, and one is, as you said, you click a button to actually sort of initiate it. Is that the current version of it, or how it works right now?
Yeah, it only shows for some queries, but I would say most queries. And it's hard to say. There's a lot of stuff it wouldn't show for, like it doesn't show for like adult content, for example. So, depending on how much of the internet that is, that's actually quite a few queries that it doesn't show for. But it shows for many more categories than I was expecting it to show for sure. So it shows very often. And then, that whole like option to turn it on or not, I would say I see that like 20% of the time.
Okay.
And then there's few searches that don't generate SGE. Again, there's like certain categories where it just wouldn't show across the board. But again, that changes every day. So you'll see different things every day.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, have you noticed any other trends besides adult content of, places where they sort of don't touch it?
Yeah, I haven't looked in a while, but in the beginning, recipe sites were somehow off the hook, which is actually kind of exciting. I think a lot of recipe companies were like, "No, this is the death of recipe, like blogging, right?"
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't always show for that, which is pretty interesting. And then there's definitely trigger words where it doesn't show.
Okay.
Something highly political, something very religious, something that could be interpreted as like violent or harassing content or conspiracy content. Like it just will never show.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Fascinating. Here's another specific question from Joseph. He's wondering, have you seen things pulled from forums as part of the SGE?
I have not seen that. No, I haven't seen that, but Google has simultaneously launched a new feature called Perspectives. So that's a new tab that you'll see for certain queries directly under the search box, the same way that you'll see, images and news and flights and this kind of thing. You can sometimes see perspectives, and that's completely filled with, Reddit, Quora, TikTok, YouTube, and actually people's blogs with different perspectives on things. So I'm not sure if like forum content's not eligible for SGE. But sorry, something popped up on my computer. But yeah, it doesn't seem like they're pulling from forums currently.
Okay, cool. That's super helpful. Oleg had a couple of specific things. Maybe we can just unpack these. This one's not really a question, but he mentioned, sort of focusing on the thumbnails in the top right there. Do we know anything about the thumbnails in the carousel? Are those, sort of the OG image, or where are those being pulled from? Do we know?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer. Maybe somebody else here in the chat does. But I do know, like for Wikipedia, for example, it's often blank. So I imagine it's probably something like Google Discover, where like, you can specify like a featured image in the structured data or in the OG tag or whatever, or obviously it's probably going to pull from whatever's the featured hero image on the page, but maybe somebody else knows the answer. I haven't actually tested that yet.
Yeah, that's a whole, obviously there's a million, sort of specifications and optimization tips and strategies that we're going to be seeing, I would assume in the near future, but with so many things changing, it's hard to say for sure, here's how we're going to influence this or things like that. Oleg also had this question. He asked about indirect prompt injection. I'm not sure what that refers to. Do you know, Lily, or we can ask for clarification?
I know a little bit. I don't know that much about it. I think it's like kind of a hacker thing to influence like what gets pulled into the chat, but I don't know enough about it. Maybe Oleg, you do. We can talk about it offline.
Yeah, as I say, feel free to clarify there, Oleg, if you want us to answer a specific question. But let's see. I think we had a couple other like sort of specific, kind of industry specific questions. So Amy was asking, we touched on this a little bit, publishers, any thoughts on, how a publisher might respond to SGE, or anything that they should be doing or thinking about?
That's a tricky one. One thing that I don't exactly love about SGE in its current form is it still shows results for things like if you say recent news in New York City, it'll look at a bunch of news and publisher sites, summarize the news, and then not really show where they got all that information from. And not only that, but I have some slides in my presentations that show this. It'll say a 58-year-old woman in Midtown Manhattan had a heart attack. A restaurant in the East Village burned down. Like it'll create this like summarized list of news without any way to get to the source of the information, without any specifics about who or when or where or why it happened. Like all the things that you get from news publishers and top stories are not available in SGE. So I think that's a really poor use case for SGE.
Right.
Hopefully Google realizes that top stories and Google News like are there for a reason. People like those features. So as far as what publishers should do, I don't know. It's hard to say with news particularly, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity around evergreen content. I think the more that you can pay attention to like how it's sourcing the information that it shows in that little carousel, just type your evergreen keywords and see what it's selecting and see what you can influence to try to become one of the sites that it links to.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It certainly seems to me like even if they do have a pretty tight, turnaround window for including stuff in the results, like it's going to be hard for them ever to really capture anything that's like super timely, right? Like I don't know how you would functionally do that.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like, I showed an example. Actually, this wasn't SGE. This was Chat GPT browser mode. But like, let's say something really big happens. Donald Trump gets indicted, and you can ask SGE, did Donald Trump get indicted, or when did it happen? And it'll look at a couple of different news sources, and it'll be able to like extrapolate like the when and where, like the important details about when something took place. Like I can see how that's helpful for users, but hopefully they do it in a way where they're really still driving traffic to publishers who are actually doing that work.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing, and maybe we can dive into this a little bit. One of the things that I've been personally thinking about is like, what are the types of queries that are going to be sort of most easily satisfied, let's say by a snippet. Let's assume they fix all the little weird things and outliers and stuff. Assuming that this rolls out, it's just, again, it's sort of like featured snippets, right? Certain queries are going to be impacted much more than other queries. And I guess, in your opinion or in your experience, Lily, are there like sort of certain categories or flavors or types of queries that you think will be least impacted that folks might want to be focused on?
Well, there's a lot of questions that require perspectives, which is quite literally why Google is launching 2 different search features called perspectives, where they allow you to see different ways of answering the same question. They actually also have like a featured snippet layout where they'll show a couple of different answers to the same question. So anything that doesn't have one conclusive answer, I think, but different categories, it's hard to say, because like even now, if you Google like relationship advice or like dieting advice, it'll often show SGE, and it'll often show like, this is the general consensus about what we think about the keto diet. And it's like, one of the reasons I think so many people love search engines is because you can pick and choose what you want to read, or read, contradicting information or whatever. So I think it's a little bit strange that they're trying to provide one true answer for so many topics, but hopefully that gets scaled back with enough user data.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, maybe something to think about there for publishers might be, yeah, how can you kind of wade into some of these topics that aren't sort of definitive, again, just using feature snippets as sort of a model there, things like what is queries, right, are easily answered by feature snippets. So, even if you rank for those, you generally won't see a lot of search traffic, things like that would likely be similar trends to what we would see in an SGE universe. Let's say. Yeah. Cool. And then I'm gonna guess that your name is Eve. Eve had a question. We touched a little bit on recipe websites, and you were sort of surprised that they were less impacted perhaps than expected. Has that changed at all, or do you have any thoughts specific to recipe websites and how they might respond to SGE?
Yeah, again, I mean, I hope that they continue to not show it for recipe sites, to be honest. I think actually probably a lot of people want SGE for recipe sites, because I know a lot of people kind of complain about user experience on many of these sites. But you can Google certain things, I think, like how to boil an egg, like things like this, and you can see Google SGE will pull from a number of different, it's not only recipe sites, like sometimes it's like how-to websites and things like this. So again, like same with the publisher sites, what I would do is I would type those types of queries if they're important to you, if you have like a lot of like how to do XYZ cooking thing, and see what is causing these sites to appear in SGE. It could be something as simple as like maybe the way that they've bulleted the content out, and maybe the way that they start the sentence, or maybe they have like the exact question that the user is typing as a headline and then the answer directly below that. So pay attention to those commonalities, and Google will actually highlight them for you. Just do the kind of manual keyword research to see what's being selected and see if there's ways you can kind of adjust your content accordingly.
Yeah. Makes sense. And it's sort of weird, right? 'Cause in a way, recipes are sort of like opinionated content, like you mentioned before, right? If you know, how do you make an apple pie or whatever, right? There's 20 different recipes on how to make an apple pie. And everybody has like their own slight version of it. So how does Google decide what's the right recipe?
Yeah. Honestly, I've been saying this for a while now. I hope that Google considers launching some kind of place for recipe sites, like a place within the search results, because
Sure.
what would be terrible, and I joked about this a while back when ChatGPT came out, and like what would be terrible is if everyone's using the exact same recipe all the time, you know?
Right.
Like,
Right.
that would be a very bland world that we're living in. So maybe there's a way for Google to be like, hey, like similar to Perspectives, hey, we have all these fantastic recipe bloggers. And if you really like this person's style, you want to see how they make chocolate chip cookies, like go there. But the idea of taking all of it and trying to summarize it with AI, it's like, geez, that's not very exciting, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the dystopian AI future we all hope doesn't materialize,
Chocolate chip
right?
cookies made by AI. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Valerie has a great question, which I think is a good sort of segue here, maybe. So she says that she's in the middle of updating and publishing new pillar pages, and she's wondering, is there any advantage to waiting for better clarity around search and AI? Which I think this is maybe a broader question, perhaps, which is, we've seen so many things happening in 2023. There's so many things that are sort of half here. We've got this AI is in beta. We don't know if or when or how it's going to roll out exactly. What's your advice to folks right now? Like, should we be making changes or implementing changes at the moment to try to get ahead of these changes? Should we be waiting? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think you should wait for anything. I think you should continue pushing forward with whatever you're doing. I mean, there's so many tools already at our disposal. Most importantly, your own user data, like your own website analytics, your own user feedback, your own customer support teams and the information that they have. Like, I wouldn't wait for AI to try to make any changes. Even as it is, like, you can make changes now that you can start to measure the impact of how those changes impacted conversion rates and rankings and everything like that. It's going to take a really long time for us to have a good grasp on like how to potentially optimize for these features, if at all. I think there might not even be really like surefire ways to optimize for it. So I would absolutely like continue building whatever you're building, but instead of trying to like respond to whatever's changing in search, really just try to focus on the end consumer and providing good value for your users.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's actually another interesting point. I don't want to spend too much time belaboring that, but I think Google's algorithm historically, right, that there is sort of a code behind it, right? Like they understand how different factors impact the results, things like that. When we're talking about large language models and sort of, neural networks and how all these things work, like there is a certain element of like a black box where even Google doesn't always know, or OpenAI doesn't always know why it is generating a specific result or how it's sort of consuming information and creating an output. So there may never be like a definitive guide of, here are the exact ranking factors that are going to impact the output of this AI. I guess fact check me on that, Lily.
No, I think you're right. And I think that a lot of it's going to boil down to like, there's only so many ways you can like try to influence something that's really trying to show, I don't know, the average consensus on a certain topic. And if you can't call every publisher on the internet and ask them to say, can you just let them know that my brand is the best brand? That's not how the internet works. So in a way, it's nice because hopefully it'll like result in more authentic, truthful results. But like all things in SEO, we like to try to find any way we can manipulate information. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's what we get paid for, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, that's super helpful. Again, if you have any additional questions, we do have, we have about 10 minutes left here with Lily. So I have a couple other questions. I know we've got a couple more in the chat that I want to get to. Before we've got some questions here on sort of AI in general and sort of the other side of the coin, which is using AI to create content. I want to talk a little bit about that. But before we get there, you mentioned Bing before, which I keep joking with folks is like, I never thought in my SEO career that I'd be having a lot of conversations about Bing in 2023, but here we are. I guess real quick thoughts on Bing's current product versus Google SGE.
Yeah, I've been pretty outspoken about this. I had the same reaction. I didn't know when I would be doing some SEO keynotes earlier this year that I had to like delete everything I was doing and put a whole section about Bing. That was not on my bingo card. Bingo card, no pun intended. Yeah, it's been exciting. It's super cool. I actually just spoke at a couple of conferences with Fabrice from Bing's engineering team and their Bing Webmaster Tools team and everything like that. And they're up to some really, really cool stuff over there. I actually love Bing Chat. I think it's awesome. I think it's the most exciting AI tool on the market right now. Obviously, ChatGPT is super awesome, but it uses similar technology. Bing Chat does a lot of the things that I hope SGE will do. Like, I think it's much more precise in its answers. It cites its sources very carefully. It provides attribution. It relies on like brand new information. So like if you index something on Bing quickly, it can often pull that information directly into Bing's answers. Obviously, it gets things wrong. They all do, but in my experience, it gets things wrong a lot less of the time. And it's fun. It kind of has like a fun and cheeky personality. I think they had to dial that back a bit in the beginning, which was kind of entertaining, but it's a different way of experiencing search. It's really like, it's like my little buddy that, helps me figure things out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is super interesting. So, would your expectation, I guess you kind of say this explicitly, but your hope is that SGE sort of becomes more like Bing, which is sort of again a weird thing to say, I think.
Weird thing to say. And from the standpoint of providing much better attribution and sourcing, yes, I really hope they do. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, we've been experimenting with a little bit. Yeah, and yeah, it does have a lot of strengths that you won't find with Google SGE or ChatGPT or any of the other tools at the moment. So it's pretty fascinating to see how that will play out. Cool. Well, thank you so much for answering all those questions. Again, folks, if you have any additional sort of specific questions about SGE, pop those into the chat. Otherwise, I want to pivot a little bit. Like I said, we want to talk a little bit about kind of the other side of this coin, which is, us using AI and sort of how that may or may not impact Google content marketing, SEO broadly. One question that we had in the chat was your thoughts on publishing AI generated content that has been reviewed for accuracy, helpfulness by a vetted expert. So I guess let's just tackle this big question in general. What are your thoughts right now, Lily, on using AI to create content that you publish on your website?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the biggest and hottest question in our industry this year. I happen to be, like with most things in SEO, I'm on one kind of extreme of the spectrum. I'm very careful. My team and I are very careful about this. I think there's going to be a lot of implications that we haven't necessarily seen yet as far as how this content is evaluated, both by search engines and users as well. Not to mention like legal implications of using like AI content across our sites and our client sites. So I'm very cautious. But does that mean that there's not many different use cases for it? Now, I think that there's a lot of really impressive ways that people are using AI content. In this question, you mentioned having it reviewed for accuracy and helpfulness by an expert. Like, I believe that that's necessary. Sometimes I wonder if that's like really the most efficient process to just like generate AI content and then bring in an expert when you could have just had the expert like share what they know, which I think maybe is better off in the long run. But there's a lot of use cases for using AI where I think it's perfectly harmless and in fact probably very beneficial. It probably speeds things up a lot. So like product descriptions on e-commerce websites, I think that's usually fine. I would just be cautious. I think that just because things work now, like so many things with SEO, just because things are working now, just because you have one case study where it worked, just because things are, up by 300% every month for 3 months does not mean this will always be the case. Yes. And I have a feeling that in 6 months, it's going to be a very different story as far as how this content performs.
That's a great segue to our next question, because first of all, I just want to highlight, I think Lily, you maybe have shared these, or I've certainly seen around Twitter, for every thousands of case studies of people using AI to generate tons of content, and you see the giant traffic spike, there's just as many stories of that traffic immediately plummeting. So
they just don't share the stories. Yeah, they're out there. They're just not public. Yeah, exactly.
And so Travis has a great sort of follow up there, which is, first of all, based on what we know, what is sort of Google's current ability to generate or to detect AI generated content, and what are your expectations and sort of how they're going to handle that moving forward?
So to my knowledge, they've never explicitly answered this question. I think this is all speculation. I don't know the extent to which they can. I know that there's a lot of tools that can or try to, a lot of strong opinions about how well the tools work, and a lot of people trying to like, oh, if I change 4 words, it doesn't get detected as AI content anymore, which I have to believe that if Google is doing this, which I think they probably are, or at least learning how, I don't know that changing 5 words is really going to work the way that you want it to work. But, I posted about this the other day. Even if they don't have the technology, even if GPT-5 is so human-like that they'll never be able to tell the difference, if there is a world in which people can tell the difference, even if it's in a subtle way, like, you know how ChatGPT always says the word moreover? Like, have you ever, my friends and I joke about this. Have you ever written the word moreover in a blog post in your life? So there's these subtle things. And if Google starts to see at scale, people are having a bad experience with this content, whether or not it's AI content, it's not going to rank as well. So if AI content doesn't really feel human, I think ultimately that will catch up to those sites.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's a great guide. And I think that is technically like the current official Google guidance, right? Is that there is, they basically have no problem with you using AI. It's about the quality of the content that's being published and sort of all the other ancillary factors that go into the user experience.
Yeah. Or so they say. Yeah. We'll see.
For sure. Cool. Well, that is super helpful. We are just down to our final couple minutes here. I know we have a couple of questions rolling in, but I don't think we're going to have time to do those. Lily, real quick before we wrap up, do you anything that we didn't touch on, anything else that you want to impart for folks in terms of Google SGE, AI, etc.?
No, I think I'll just say, I think it probably sounds like I'm a hater of a lot of these tools, and I think that it's not. First of all, it's not true. I'm actually using them pretty heavily in a lot of the things that I do. But I would just be careful to trust the output all the time. There's a lot of really great use cases for the tools, but you get out of it what you put in. So putting in helpful prompts, putting in data, putting in information to help guide what you get is very, very important. So don't take the answers at face value without kind of having a good understanding that the LLM that you're using actually knows what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Makes total sense. And I think, the sort of cautionary tale of the year, right? It's use AI, but don't always trust, what is it? Trust, but verify.
That's what verify. Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, once again, I just want to say thank you so much, Lily, for joining us today. And a final shout out here. If you have not followed her, you can find her on Twitter at Lily Ray NYC. You can find me on Twitter at Tyler Hakes. And if you have not joined our community, top of the funnel, yesoptimist.com/tofu. Would love to have you there. Join our community of 2,000 plus content and SEO folks. And that's going to be it for today. Lily, thank you one more time for your time today, answering so many questions and helping us navigate this wild world of SEO.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Well, thanks all for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers.